Okay, there we go. All right. I don't know, it just popped off all of a sudden. So I'm hopping on here today to talk about, overtesting kids. And let me go ahead and go into another screen. Oh, there we are. I want to talk about how to get data without overtesting your kids. So when we're talking about overtesting, we're generally talking about, at my school, they're doing a ridiculous amount of testing every week. And it just honestly does not make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. Because data comes in two forms. And if you have been on my website, I talk about qualitative and quantitative data. And I guess we should really put them in categories, because qualitative data, in my opinion, is more of a quality data point. So, for example, when I say quality data point, I'm talking about data points with information behind it. So if I'm looking at my students and I'm saying this student doesn't understand this, this, and this, because I'm basing it on student work, I'm basing it on observation in class, and I'm basing it on how the student is doing with the content over time. And I'm looking here, that's a quality instructional data point. If you're going to say, I'm going to make decisions based on data, but a lot of administrators are taking quantitative data and making instructional decisions when it only gives us one piece of the puzzle. And I think qualitative data, which are anecdotal notes, and what I'm going to show you all today, they give you the information that you need. So the first thing, that in order to implement this mastery check tracker, is to actually know what mastery looks like. So for example, myself, I'm teaching 8th grade math, and I teach 4 sections of mathematics. And we have been working on 8.8C, which is model and solve equations and inequalities. And the kids have to create a model and solve it. We have the math piece and we have the real life piece, which is the problem solving. But we're working on the math piece, which I know my students are struggling with. Well, the math, two of my classes are not doing very well with it, which we already have their universal screener, because we know that they are mostly classified as tier 2 or tier 3 students. So we know that they're struggling anyway. So what I have done is put together a mastery tracker, and I'm going to show it to you. This is a mastery check tracker, and I'm going to show you how I actually use it. So each day when I teach a lesson, what I do is I go around my class, and my students know that we're going to do a mastery check. And for example, student 1, let me put that here. Ooh. Let me make that smaller. So this is student 1. And we have been working on equations. So say for instance, I'll make this bigger. Say for instance, this is day 1 of teaching. So we'll say 9, what was last week? We'll say 9/20. This is day 1. Now, all of this information I write down because I need to see what is happening over the course and what shifts are being made. Because truth be told, if you're teaching in a 2-day cycle, say for instance, you're introducing on Monday and on Tuesday, you're clearing, you're practicing and you're cementing, and then you're like, okay, I'm done. We're going to actually wrap it up, and then we're going to test on Monday. Well, here's day 2. And so we have student 1 and student 2, and we're just going to mimic what I have seen. So day 1, day 2, student 1, student 2. So say for instance on day 1, the student 1, he can do the model. Okay. And I write down the student is able to do the model because the objective is that they have to actually be able to master solving and modeling 2-step equations with variables on both sides of the equation. So they can do the model, but they can't do the actual equation, which that lets me know that the student, there's some issue with them taking the model and moving to the abstract, which that's a whole nother issue. Then student 2 is able to actually do both of them. So let me put student 3. I wasn't. And then we have student 3 who's not able to do any of them. So I have one student who can do the model, and then I have another student who mastered it on the first day of the actual lesson, okay? And this does happen. Tier 1 kids typically master at the end of the lesson. And this is one of the things I was explaining to my principal. The learning cycle for tier 2 and tier 3 kids is not the same as tier 1 kids. The learning cycle for tier 2 and tier 3 kids is generally further off than that first week. And there's no need to test them because guess what? They're going to fail the test. And that's actually what has been happening with our students that have been labeled tier 2 or tier 3. They're failing. And it only confirms what I already know about the kids. So let's look at day 2 of this actual objective. So day 2, we say, okay, tier 1 student continues to be able to do it. So with the problem solving, you're wrapping it up, they can still get it, okay? Sometimes kids will understand it, and this helps with knowing if they're retaining it. Because sometimes we'll see kids that say, hey, oh, they had it the first day, but what happened the second day? That's a retention issue. That means that that student needs more practice because there's no such thing as I had it today and tomorrow is gone. That means it wasn't learned. So you have to watch for that in this tracker as well. Student 1, say for instance, they still continue to struggle. And then on second day of day 2 with equations, they just couldn't pull it together. They got the model, but then they're iffy. Now, here's the thing. In order for it to be mastery, students cannot get any help with the assignment. They must be 100% independent because that lets you know that whether you're standing there or not, they can do it and there's no guidance. If they have to get help, then that is not mastery. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of teachers neglect And we're so used to prompting kids, oh, you know how to know. They don't know how to do it. If you have to prompt them, then it's not mastery. And then you have student 3 who, okay, on the second day, they got the model. Now, this data for me as a teacher who services 90% of my current roster are tier 2, tier 3 kids. This data gives me more data than one qualitative singular data point. Because what it tells me how long the sequence went as far as teaching and what the child did on each day, where they began and where it ended. And what it also does, it gives me information to go back, because this is a readiness TEK, meaning that it's one of those TEKs that the kids have to master to do well on a standardized test. So when I'm ready to do small group, I have actual data that's going to tell me, okay, how am I going to group these students? I have a student that needs the model. This student, this tier 1 student, you don't need to see them in small group. You don't need to see them. So that weeds all of that front end prep where you're saying, how do I group my kids? If you're tracking your students through your teaching, you will see who needs help. And it's not a guessing game. You don't have to go back to the actual quantitative data, which is that singular number, to say, oh, I'm going to pull this kid, and then you get them in a small group and you realize, oh, they don't need the help. This tracker will help you weed out, and it will help you with less time trying to figure out who needs small group. And you can also take this to your data digs, because I guarantee you with this, you can speak more to your data than any test can ever speak to your students' data. And I do this at the end of my lessons. At the end of the day, I have my students in their composition book. I have them titled a little part at the bottom that says mastery check, and I go around and check the kids before we switch to other classes. Now, there is no magic pill for data. It just isn't. There's not a magic pill. You have to track your kids, and giving them a test, putting them on a program, this will give you more data than you could ever want. And it'll save you from a headache and those uncomfortable conversations that you have to have with your principal. It does. Like my principal, I just sent her a screenshot of it because I was telling her she wants us to test the kids every week. Why do I need to test them? She was like, well, we need to see if they're retaining it. Well, if we're going to test them, test the tier 1 kids, because we already know the tier 2, tier 3 kids are going to fail. My question is not about retention. Mine is about mastery. Are the kids mastering the content? Because that's really what we should be testing for, is mastery, not retention, not any of those other things. If a child is not at mastery, how do we get them there? And just like I said, this mastery check will help you. It'll help you, wrong one. It'll help you with deciphering what's my next step into moving these students towards mastery. So when your principal is in your data digs and they're like, well, what are your next steps? Well, I'm going to group my students based on these mastery checks, and I'm going to group them based on what I know about what they're doing. Not a singular, oh, I'm bubbling in, because You know what they say about standardized tests and multiple choice tests? They said, you can get a 50 without trying. And that's what some of our kids do. So if you're going to make like instructional decisions, you need to have a system that is sound for your students so that it's seamless. This is easy template. It's made in Word. I actually shared it. If you are on this live or watching the replay, you can actually get this in my Math Intervention Academy. I shared it with them because it's something that's real easy for math interventionists and math teachers. So I hope that this was beneficial and it gives you some ideas of how to get data from your kids without always giving them a test. Kids are over-testing. You can do it by observation. You're the expert in the classroom. Take what you know and put it to good use instead of relying on a test to give you the data. I think the over-reliance of that one quantitative point has made us make math intervention something that is not supposed to be. It's our data and what we see is supposed to guide our students, and data comes in different forms. The qualitative data is a much better quality data point than any quantitative data point can ever give you, because to use a quantitative, which are the numbers, you're going to have historical data. One data point, singular data point in time, is not going to give you what you need to make any instructional decisions. So if you're watching this on the replay, if you have any questions, leave a comment in the comment section, and I will see you all in my next live stream.